authorities, dear friends, I am very happy and very much honored to conclude this incredible forum. And I have been asked to say a few words on the co-building of the new Silk Road, the great cooperation that this message of peace and of growth is given. And I will spend the 20 minutes that has been graciously given to express very personal ideas. You know, I don't represent anybody. I am former, you know, but now I'm only. But I don't think that it's important to have personal views on these matters, you know. First, which is the political environment of the One Belt, One Road. Clearly, it came out after long meditation, but the occasion was, you know, in my opinion, the proposal of the transatlantic trade agreement, TTIP, with the exclusion of China and the movement that this has started. And of course, this was the occasion, but it was a long-range strategy. The idea of the centrality of Asia, of the new centrality of Asia that China has put forward for such a long period of time, is a long-range strategy that in one moment of history went out with a multiple action. I say a double action. First, the AIIB, Asian Investment and Infrastructure Bank, and the proposal One Belt, One Road. I put them together because they must be linked not only in the strategy but also in the concrete action. The bank, the Investment Infrastructure Bank, it was also the fruit of a long period of political dialogue and political unsatisfaction. It was the answer to the long enduring effort by China, by many other countries, to change the rules of the World Bank and of the IMF, and the insatisfaction for two great institutions, great and, you know, I think very important institutions, but they were linked to their origin and not changing with the changing of the world. And this bank was immediately backed by 21 Asian states, and this was expected and normal, as to use the word that now is very popular in China. But the real surprise was when the 15th of March of 2015, the British Minister of Treasury, Osborne, declared that his country would have become member of the bank. This was a real surprise for everybody, for me too, because it's the first case in my political life in which United Kingdom was put against United States without any previous declaration of that. You know, Ambassador Brahimi knows very well how these things. And clearly, this is another change in the world because these things are done only because there are changes. And the change is the new role, international finance and monetary role of China, and the interest of the City of London to be the financial, the market of the renminbi, and the competition with Wall Street is a new settlement of the world. And of course, this has put the bank in the forefront because the day after UK, Germany, France, Italy were declared to be member of the bank. And so it's not anymore, is still an Asian bank to invest in Asia, but is a Euro-Asian bank. Is a completely different entity in political terms. And now there is a great challenge, and China has a great responsibility because these banks needs not only money, but needs talents, needs skills, needs know-how, needs a very international team, And this is a big task, a big challenge, not easy to do. And we are here in a university, and the role of the universities to provide people with this new mentality is absolutely important and outstanding. Of course, I started mentioning the bank and Silk Road together, not only because they were born simultaneously, but because, as I hinted in the beginning, they are linked. They are two legs of the same body. And clearly linking strictly both Europe and China, not only Silk Road, but both Europe and China. And linking, at least there are many statistics about that, but at least 50% of world population, 50% of world GDP. So it's not a small choice, you know. And because don't forget that Europe, with all the problems, with all the difficulties, because the European challenge is the most important challenge of modern politics, you know, to put together 28 countries and with the difficulties. And in my life, I had the experience how difficult this task, but it's a fantastic political goal that should be imitated, not only in Europe, you know. With all the difficulties we have, Europe is still among the leading economic entities of the world. We are #1 in industrial production, #1 in exports, 493 million people. Well, a village compared to China, but not so small. And this Europe is really a part, an important part of the contemporary world. And the relation between China and Europe are very strong. The trading amounted last year to 467 billion euros, more than 1.3 billion euros per day. Can you believe that? And the biggest flow of trade in the world. So we are not talking about marginal aspects, you know. And in this year we had not only an economic growing in the interdependence, but very important dialogue in many issues, you know, from intellectual property to urbanization to different cultural exchange. And clearly we don't succeed in some of the efforts that I try to do during my commission, let's say the end of arms embargo and the market economic status, and even more the common Galileo project to have a shared GPS structure between China and Europe, in which Germany, France, Spain, and Italy agreed, but it was impossible to materialize later. And as I was joking to say, we always have been fiancés, even if we never got married, but we had many children, and children are trade, investments, cooperation, intellectual, and so we are not one-child policy, we adopted many children policy, and relations are increasing, but they are different now. They are not anymore centered on Beijing, Brussels, but more Berlin, Beijing, Paris, Beijing, Rome, Beijing, and 16+1 Beijing. So it's a strong cooperation with Europe, but with some sort of split relation. And of course, this does not make problems, but does not give the unity to the cooperation between China and Europe that I dreamed in my old times. And I cannot also forget that how much China helped Europe in the time of the construction of the euro. For Chinese interest and for European interest. I do remember in the meeting with the Chinese president when he told me, look, I do like that if side by side to the dollars there is another currency, the euro, is interest for China because it will be much easier to have the renminbi there in the future. This is a normal intelligent policy, and this has increased the mutual confidence, overcoming also difficult periods that we could have. Now, a next step is needed, and is needed by China, because now, with the increase of the level of technologies, of the dimensions of so many Chinese companies, either these companies globalize, or will become global, or they will die. It's clear, when you arrive, we have many examples of other Asian countries. When you arrive to such a dimension of technology, you need to have the world market. And so China is clearly in the eve of this change. And to globalize, you have to go to United States and to Europe. And in my opinion, the choice to link with Europe is easier, and it also has many more choices. You can choose between a low-cost labor country and country with different skills. And so it's much more, for a strategy of a company, it's much more an open field to start the globalization process through Europe. And second is, in this historical moment, maybe not tomorrow, but it's easier to invest in Europe than in the United States. There are less political constraints. So I do think that we are in the eve of new, stronger links between China and Europe. Clearly, we have to translate this concept of Silk Road in a project. And this is a great challenge. Clearly, some days we must arrive to create some sort of common Silk Road fund with cooperation with the Juncker proposal for investment in Europe and the Asian proposal. It's impossible to separate this strategy if we want to have a long-term cooperation. And clearly, when I say long-term because 30, 35 years will be needed to complete this project, but there is a glorious brand and a political will. And so this can be performed. To go to the concrete aspect, there are two components in the Silk Road. The first one is the sea, and the second is the land. Sea is South China, Malacca, Horn of Africa, till Venice, where the traditional end of the Silk Road. And land, we shall talk later. On the Silk Road, you need 34, 40 years from China to Europe. It is, and it will remain in terms of quantity, the most important link. But even now that Chinese attention in this field is so great, I have to remember you that China is 40% of world new ships and 47% of new ship orders. So how important is in this field, you know? And 7 out of the biggest containers, 7 out of 10 of the biggest container ports in the world are Chinese. So this is not a new strategy, this is an old one, you know. I can mention COSCO, CS, CL, Orient Overseas, OOC, C, and, you know. And this is not an old type of transportation because it's changing in terms of dimension of the ships, cost, and it changes the ports and the economic area where it goes. For example, in the last years, the Chinese strategy changed a lot the European economy, moving to Piraeus, the center of the Mediterranean, to Europe. The port of Piraeus, owned half by Chinese, it has passed from 0.7 million TEU in 2009 to 3.5 million TEU last year, and the program is to arrive soon to 6.2 million TEU. 9 times growth in a period of 8 years. So, and the consequence will be a railroad from Greece to north of Europe and a great development of the Balkans due to that. And then the Chinese move to have a relation with the 16+1, the East European countries, to implement this strategy. So you understand how this maritime route can change the world, even if it's not new. And then I don't mention the consequence in Asia, you know, the change of a port of Gwadar in Pakistan, the new flourishing probably of Bandar Abbas in Iran, and the West African coasts, and the possibility of increasing even this direct flow. So it's just that gives you the idea of the change of the influence of this change in the world. And clearly the new message of the Silk Road is the land route. We have a northern route through Russia and the possibility of more southern routes to Kazakhstan and many other countries. The characteristics are 1/5 of the time of the maritime route and higher costs. And so they will be for goods that have a more urgent need to be delivered. But so is also a big option that will take, I think, around 10% of this enormous trade, you know. So it's very big, but this is different because it's a great opportunity for a complete new development of Central Asia. It's not only a message to Europe, but it's a message to the inter countries that are between Europe and China. And so there will be a lot of microeconomic consequence. And China must be very careful to help and to develop with agreement of the countries this area of development, because it's a very expensive strategy, roads, pipelines, and huge quantity of capital, and so must be accompanied by a development of the areas that will be influenced by this new infrastructure. 10,000 kilometers, so it's not a small track. And look, by land there are much more political risks than by sea. Risk of security, terrorism, organized crime, extortions, but risk of political stability of the countries, risk of government efficacy, risk of legal and regulatory environment, risk for standards of local infrastructure. It's a complete settlement respect to the so for the Northern Route you need a totally Russian cooperation, and this is important, a policy of co-decision with all the countries crossed by the new lines. On land you cannot impose anything because even the smallest bureaucrat can stop a train. It's a very political, delicate problem, And so not challenge with Russia, not take the cooperation with the small countries for granted, and because of this type of strategy, no political conditions. There is what the comparison with the Marshall Plan. Marshall Plan was a precondition for a military political alliance. This has no precondition, so it's a completely different political arrangement, much more difficult, much more challenging, and I think very much interesting, And but this is as also difficult to manage, but very interesting for the political environment of the world, because it's a new model of cooperation and is necessary for the success. It's necessary a completely new model of cooperation. But we cannot forget also the big advantage for China, the internal province of China, and they will be much more central and will be closer to Asian and the European market, and will balance better in terms of development income with the southern sea regions, province close to the sea. So it will have a consequence also internally for the entire province. And so these are, in my opinion, the great change of the Silk Road in terms of peace, new political environment, new economic environment, more equilibrated development, but must be run with a great political intelligence. And in the end of this, my reflections, I also think I mentioned roads, I mentioned railroads, I mentioned pipelines, but what about a digital Silk Road? We didn't think about it, but we have to accompany the Silk Road with all the new instrument because we have to involve people who are outside this new message. And this will, we need to enter, to work in these new technologies, even in this case with a cooperative accent, and mobilize the interest of the new generation on this project, So this is, the Silk Road is not a proposal to mobilize steel and cement, but to change the minds and the hearts, not only the economies, but the heart of the biggest populated area of the world. And to revive and interpret the meanings of the ancient Silk Road is a great political gesture, and we have to work in order to implement it. And clearly, behind this new Sino-European cooperation, there is also a dialogue. I don't want to end with rhetoric, but it's truth. There is also the coming back of the dialogue between two ancient civilizations, a dialogue that is absolutely important for the future peace of the world. Because, in a world threatened by the clash of civilization, the Sino-European synergy is absolutely vital. And so the new Silk Road is an anticipation of the necessity of new exchange and encounters, is in some way the engagement to create a new future harmony. Thank you.